Hey everybody, welcome back. I am today going to be doing a Christmas themed makeup look, and while I do that, I'm going to talk about my top 5 favorite Christmas movies. I'll be going through the list in no particular order. I don't know that I have a favorite of all time Christmas movie. I think I just have a collection of favorites and I like them for different reasons. A top 5 list in no particular order is probably the best way to encapsulate what I love about Christmas movies. There's no Hallmark movies on this list. There's no Christmas movies that aren't really Christmas movies. Sorry, Die Hard. And yeah, the first one is a movie that it's pretty likely that you haven't seen. I don't meet a lot of folks who have seen this movie, which is a shame because I think it's really funny. It is a movie called Christmas in Connecticut. It's a remake of an older movie that came out many years earlier, and the premise of the movie is that there is this character, her name is Elizabeth, and she is a Martha Stewart, Rachel Ray, Dear Abby kind of character where she's like the perfect homemaker, the perfect wife, the perfect cook, all those things. She's this TV personality that's just like America's sweetheart. She's a best-selling author. She has cookbooks. She has all sorts of great media that she puts out, but the gag is that she's fake. It's completely fabricated. Her whole identity is a farce. She is not married. She is, I believe, if I'm remembering right, she's a widower. So she's either a widower or a divorcee. Lives in a penthouse by herself. She doesn't cook. She doesn't have a family. She's never had children. She's an absolute opposite of the person that America thinks she is. So Elizabeth is this fake domestic goddess queen, and her studio approaches her with this pitch of, let's do this Christmas special. It's gonna be the Christmas special to end all Christmas specials. It's gonna be Christmas in Connecticut, because part of her mythos is that she has this beautiful home and family in Connecticut. And so it's gonna be Christmas in Connecticut. It's gonna be this spectacular, starring her family, starring her kids, starring her grandkids, starring everybody special in her life, and it's gonna be live television. So the studio gets her to go along with this, and they convince her, to go along with this. And they hire people to fulfill all of these roles. And so the house is rented, the people are hired, it's all fake. Like, her creepy producer is played by Tony Curtis. He is, he's cast as her husband, because I think he's always kind of had the hots for her, and it's gross. Blech. So he's skeezy and pretending to be your husband and all that stuff for this. And the one kind of hiccup comes into it when, in the current time media, in the news cycle, there's this story of this park ranger character who kind of lives in a log cabin in the middle of nowhere, and he is called out to rescue a person who's stranded in the snow on a hillside, and while he's away, his cabin burns to the ground. And The only thing that survives his cabin burning to the ground is Elizabeth's cookbook. So studio gets this bright idea, let's have him appear on the show. So, you know, here's where you've got to kind of start suspending your disbelief, because I don't think if this was such a well-protected secret that the studio would be so keen to just bring in this person who could possibly expose them. Although these days he would just sign an NDA and they would throw a fat cash stack of money at him, and he would never reveal the big secret. But instead of that, for the purposes of this movie, they decide to try to convince him that this whole thing is real. So they all not only have to pretend when it's time to do the show, they have to pretend when he's around. So it's, you know, a comedy of errors, and there's lots of shenanigans that happen while they try to convince him that this is all real at the same time. And the park ranger is played by Chris Christopherson, and Elizabeth is played by Diane Cannon. So, you know, this beautiful, beautiful blonde, and then this rugged, outdoorsy type, and she's a city girl, and he's a country boy, and, you know, so it's got some of those, like, Hallmark movie dynamics, definitely, but if anything, it's kind of a send-up of that whole genre, because it's a studio that's, like, manipulating this whole thing to, like, create this aesthetic for Christmas. So that's probably part of why I love it. And yeah, it all falls apart live on TV. When the special is airing, she decides that now is the time to let the cat out of the bag on live television and sabotage her whole career. I think she was probably becoming weary of this whole facade and wanted a way out, so what a spectacular way to end it all than to spill the secret on live television. Next movie on my list is White Christmas. So this was the movie that probably launched my love of redheaded men. Hello, Danny Kaye. Probably the first redhead I ever had a crush on. And he was just so dynamic and charismatic and funny and incredible dancer and silly, and I just adored him. Bing Crosby is also in this movie. I don't have too many nice things to say about him now that I know what a garbage human being he is. He's legendary, he's got some great music. I performed to some of his music, but not a great human, so we're just gonna go past that. And of course, Rosemary Clooney, the icon, the amazing singer, I know she's related to George Clooney. Is she George Clooney's mom? Maybe. Mom or grandma? I think mom. And she's just a powerhouse in that movie. And Vera Allen, oh my gosh, the incredible dancer. She was cast for her dancing. Fun fact, Danny Kaye's part was supposed to be Fred Astaire's part. That's why they had Vera Allen in the movie, because they needed somebody to keep up with Fred. But then it didn't happen, and so then they had Danny, and I think he did a tremendous job. So White Christmas is very special to me because I watched it as a kid, so it was one of the movies that early on imprinted a love of Christmas onto me. And so I really, really adore the movie. the costuming, the music, the whole thing, and then the sentimental story at the heart of the movie. So Danny Kaye's character and Bing Crosby's characters, they're in the military, and they have this colonel that looks after them and cares for them and protects them and keeps them safe during the war. And all the men, you know, adore him. He's a tough, stiff upper lip kind of a guy. And then they leave the service. They go on to be this like vaudeville, amazing, you know, duo. And they, through some hijinks, end up following the sisters from the movie to a gig that they have at a cabin in Vermont. And it's this big resort in the, you know, the ski capital of the world, the snow capital of the world, Vermont. And they're gonna play to a packed house at this resort and be the floor show. The Haynes sisters, that's who they are. So the Haynes sisters are gonna be the floor show at this beautiful cabin, and they get there and there's no snow in Vermont that year. It's been a not white season, so the resort they're going to play at has no guests, has no audience. They arrive and it's kind of a like, oh no, we forgot to cancel the Haynes sisters. Oh no, what are we gonna do? But as it turns out, the person who owns the resort and is running it and brought them is the colonel from the military days. So they follow the Haynes sisters there. They end up in the lobby of this place checking them in, and all of a sudden there's their colonel. Oh my god. What big surprise for them. And so this lovely reunion, and they look at this beautiful place he has that is in dire straits because there's no snow that year. And, you know, it's at risk of foreclosure. And, oh gosh, it's gonna go bad. So the girls stay anyway. They invite him to stay anyway, and they're gonna pay him, and they're gonna dance and perform for, you know, the 5 people that are there. And they do. And then the guys get this brilliant idea to like, to save the resort, let's bring in a full show. Let's do a full show. Let's hire everybody. Let's build sets. Let's do it. Let's pack this joint with, you know, let's use our fame to help this guy out, which appeals to me as an artist. Artists supporting, you know, people, raising money, especially what's going on in the world right now. It's a particularly touching thing that they do for this, for their old military leader. So, and, you know, he, to that point, isn't, the military guy, he isn't very worried about it all, because he's like, I'm going back into the military. I sent a letter in, and I am going to be a colonel in the military again, so who cares? Everything's going to be fine. But then he gets a letter back from them where they're like, oh my gosh, you're so funny. Ha! Like, we got your letter and we all passed it around and laughed. It's so funny. You're such a joker. Like, ha, hope retirement's treating you well. Like, they didn't take him seriously. They blew him off. So he's disheartened at that point. And the show planning is well underway and yada yada. And of course, Bing Crosby's character sees this happen and is like, oh, we have to do something. Like, his spirits are broken. He's so sad. So he goes on the Ed Sullivan Show, you know, pulls some strings, goes on the Ed Sullivan Show, puts out a call to the country to find all the men who were in the service with them, to have them secretly book flights and book accommodations at the lodge and show up on the opening night of the show and do a big number to show him how much we still love him and how much he meant to us and that he's not forgotten and that he's loved. So they do that. And it's just this big, beautiful moment, and he's this stoic guy. The shenanigans, they convince him, like, they send all of his suits away and convince him to, like, put on his military dress uniform to go to the show. And so he comes in and he's in just full regalia, and all of a sudden he comes in and all the men are on the stage and in the thing, and they're lined up and they're singing and they're all in their uniforms, and it's just this beautiful, heartwarming moment. And he's choked up and realizes that he's still loved and appreciated, and it's okay, like, to have those days be behind him and he can proceed forward. So I love that. I love that that moment. For me, that's the real beautiful part of that whole movie, is those men coming to tell this guy that they love him and they appreciate him. Like, the sentimental part of me is very touched by that part of the story. So I love it. And the music and the costumes, and Vera Allen and Danny Kaye and Bing Crosby and Rosemary Clooney and everybody involved, they're just all amazing, and it's such a spectacular movie. The costumes, oh yeah, it's so good. It's a classic. It's classic for a reason. And someday I will own one of those red gowns with the white trim. Yeah. All right. So, fast forward in time to another beloved holiday movie for me. We're gonna talk about Home Alone. It came out in 1990. It starred Macaulay Culkin, Catherine O'Hara. Who else do we have? Joe Pesci, John Candy, of course. Rest in peace, sir. You're amazing. And it had one thing, when I was looking it up, I didn't realize that Fuller, the cousin who, like, pees the bed, that Macaulay Culkin's character, Kevin, doesn't want to, you know, share a bed with because he's a bedwetter. That's his brother, Kiernan. And of course, Catherine O'Hara, who is having a mighty fine resurgence in popularity right now with everybody, with her being on Schitt's Creek right now. Everybody is loving on her right now, which is super fun. She's been a fave of mine since she was the mom in Beetlejuice. So, gotta love her. Such a good movie. I just loved the hijinks of it. I am the same age as Macaulay Culkin, so everything he was in at the time seemed very relevant. You know, him and Elijah Wood, they were kids who were the same age as me at the time and my best friend Ryan at the time. And so we just loved whatever they were in, because it was like watching one of us in a movie. So it was very, very relatable. And I came also from a big, boisterous, wild family. So the strife that Kevin experienced being part of a big family, I definitely wasn't like the baby of the family, but I definitely could relate to the chaos of a big family. So I really related to his struggle and also his desire to just be alone, to be left alone, to make his family disappear. But, you know, through it all, to actually really love his family. The traps that he sets, watching them as an adult now, I'm like, they would have been like dead super duper many times over. I remember always wanting to sled down the steps, just like Kevin did. But I never had like a staircase that was long and straight enough to do it. And certainly not one that went out the front door of the house. The next movie I want to highlight is the 2003 classic. It's a rather new one to be on the list, a modern day movie that has quickly become a Christmas classic, Elf, starring Will Ferrell. I just watched a really great documentary on Netflix. They did a Movies That Made Us Christmas edition, and Elf was one of the movies that they covered. And I learned a lot of really fun things about the creation of that movie, so I really recommend going and watching that documentary. I really love it. One of the things I learned was that the screenwriter for the film, like one of the like goals he had in making that movie was to create a holiday classic. Like that was one of his like pitch goals. And I think he really did it. It's a very sweet movie. It's about father and son connecting, which I guess was something that Jon Favreau, the director, was really adamant about. Like a young Buddy, like baby Buddy or toddler Buddy, was played by his kid, which I think is really sweet. I didn't know that. And I love the comedy of it. Will Ferrell is just perfect in it. It's that classic trope of like stranger in a strange land, that kind of misfit. He's in the real world. He's lived in this isolation in this different place, and now he's in our modern world and is thrown into the thick of it, and he's idealistic and an optimist, and the world is so dark and dingy. I love that it was set in New York, because there couldn't be quite a different aesthetic than New York versus the North Pole. And one thing that I felt absolutely ashamed of, and I don't even know if I want to say it here. Okay, I'm gonna say it. Alright, I can be really oblivious at times. And I didn't make a conscious realization that the Elf and North Pole aesthetic that they were using for Elf was straight out of the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer universe. Like the costumes, everything. Like it directly, like they had to get like licensing rights to use it. Like it almost didn't get released because they couldn't hammer out like the licensing details. So that's a thing that I didn't consciously realize until watching the documentary on it, and they had a section about that, working through the legality of that process. And I just feel like a big dum-dum for not realizing that. So, the secret's out. I'm rather ridiculous at times in my obliviousness. So anywho, I love that. Now knowing that, it makes it even better. That documentary talked about the New York scenes, like on the street and stuff. A lot of that was like just literally set up a camera and let Will Ferrell do crazy crap in New York. Like the crowd shot, like those people aren't extras. They were just like people who were on the street. I mean, imagine that. Like you were just like walking in New York one day and suddenly you're in the background of a smash Hollywood movie that comes out. Like the guy in like the red jogging suit was just there. Like that's just, I love that. I love that it was just all kind of crazy guerrilla style filming. It just cracks me up. My final movie on the list is 1993's big flop Disney classic now, Nightmare Before Christmas. And you might be wondering, what does Holliedazzle think about Nightmare Before Christmas? Is Nightmare Before Christmas a Christmas movie? Or is Nightmare Before Christmas a Halloween movie? And the answer is yes. That's the answer. It's both. Nightmare Before Christmas is one that they did on that Netflix documentary as well. I've watched a lot of documentaries about Nightmare Before Christmas over time, so I've known quite a bit about it, and I love the way the Netflix documentary did a really good job of like summing up all the really important points of the story of the movie, and how when it didn't perform and critics didn't get it and people didn't get it like they thought they would, that Disney just like disowned it kind of, because they just didn't think that kids were gonna like it, so they were marketing it to adults and adults didn't know what to do with it. And it wasn't until many years later that the movie has seen the kind of resurgence that it has in popularity. It was really popular in Japan, I guess. I always loved it. I was a goth, so, you know, go figure. It was a classic to me from the start. It's awesome now that you can get so much merch for the movie because it has grown such a cult following. And when I moved out into my like first studio apartment by myself, I had a Nightmare Before Christmas bathroom that I had. I didn't realize, once again, living legend Catherine O'Hara was the voice of Sally. I didn't know that. And I didn't know that Sally like was kind of like the gal that wrote the screenplay for the movie. She was Danny Elfman's girlfriend at the time, and she kind of put a lot of herself into Sally, which I dug. Like, she got the like character designs from Tim, and she was like, what if Sally is like less of a sex pot and more of like her own woman and her own character? Like, she wasn't the kind of the empty-headed character I think that she was going to be before that gal took over for her, which I just love. And Danny Elfman's performance of Jack singing voice is stunning, incredible, amazing. He was so good at it. And something I learned from the documentary was that Danny put a lot of his feelings about, Danny was, before Tim really took him and made him into a composer and had him doing all the music for all of his movies and everything, Danny was in a rock band called Oingo Boingo, which I knew. I know many Oingo Boingo songs. And he was kind of growing weary of being a rock star. He had this very dedicated fan base, and several albums, and they toured, and they were fairly popular. Dead Man's Party, like that's a song I think most people know and they don't realize who it was by. And so he was looking for like a way out of that life, and so the character of Jack, like the way he wrote the songs and everything, was very much his journey away from something that he felt obligated to do as an entertainer. And I love that. That just makes complete sense. I can see it now. I know that the next time I watch Nightmare Before Christmas, I'm gonna watch it with a different lens, knowing that about Danny and what he put into Jack, about feeling pigeonholed about what you do. I'm feeling like there's an expectation of your brand or your role. That's something I hope I never run into as Holliedazzle, with having such a strong brand of Christmas, that I hope like I never feel like Jack, or I feel like tired of it. Those are my favorite Christmas movies. Like I said at the beginning, I don't really watch the Hallmark Christmas movies. They don't really appeal to me. I'm not much of a romantic comedy kind of gal. I think the only way I've watched any of those movies is by watching Two Queens Who Like to Watch, Trixie Mattel and Katya, the drag queens, watch them and watch them through them, and I think that's probably the only way I'd want to watch any of those movies. So they're just not for me. They're just not for me. I know a lot of people that enjoy them, and no shame on that. You enjoy those, that is fine. They're just not for me. Another movie that's not for me, and we mentioned it during the Elf portion of the program, is the claymation Rudolph movie. I don't like that movie. It rubbed me the wrong way as a kid, the story, because I knew that the bullying of Rudolph was wrong, and it like hurt me that he was like different in this really cool way, and like nobody accepted him for that, or like saw that like, oh my god, he's essentially got like magic powers with this nose, and they just like mercilessly taunted him and made fun of him instead, until suddenly he had like a purpose, and then suddenly he was okay. And that, even as a kid, that story pissed me off. So I've never been a fan of that movie. And the abominable snowman from that movie scared the hell out of me as a kid. He was a monster. And like, I don't know if it's just like the way the claymation like is kind of stuttery and weird, but that made the abominable snowman like that much scarier to me. And I just like, I don't even like when I see that stuff in the stores now, because there's a lot of nostalgia around it. I get freaked out. I don't like it. No thank you. Thanks for tuning in today to hear about my top 5 favorite Christmas movies. What are yours? I'd love to hear below in the comments. Come and talk to me about what movies you like. Did you watch any of the movies on my list that you haven't seen before? And what did you think of them? What is your favorite Hallmark movie that I've never seen and will never see? Thanks again for tuning in today, and I will see you next time. Bye!